Hi, I'm Len Epp from LeanPub, and in this episode of the Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Daniel Knott. Based in the greater Hamburg area, Daniel is a software test engineer and a popular conference speaker. Currently, he's head of software testing at Mybornwolf, a strategic IT consultancy based in Munich. You can follow him on Twitter at DNLKNTT and check out his website at adventuresinqa.com, as well as his software testing YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/Daniel Knott. Daniel is the author of the LeanPub books Smartwatch App Testing and Hands-on Mobile App Testing, a guide for software testers and anyone involved in the mobile app business. In the book, Daniel covers what makes mobile testing different, the special challenges it presents, and introduces you to advanced mobile testing methods and tools, and much more. In this interview, we're going to talk about Daniel's background and career, professional interests, his books, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about his experience as a content creator and author. So thank you very much, Daniel, for being on the LeanPub Front Matter podcast.
Hi, Len. Thank you for having me today.
I always like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up and how you found your way into a career in software testing.
Yeah, sure. Let me start. I grew up in the middle of Germany, basically in the middle of nowhere on a small farm with my parents, my sisters. And it was a great time because back then I already was like a little explorer, trying to dismantle on and demount like all kinds of technical issues and topics. So that was great and fun. I also grew up with lots of animals, so I was kind of grounded back then. But then out of nowhere, I don't know when it was happened, when I was a teenager, I first had the first magazine of computers in the store, and I was pretty much hooked with like, okay, I want to be in computer science. I would like to learn everything about computers. I started to build up my own computer. I can't remember when it was. It was somewhere in the 90s. So that was great fun. I learned many things also by mistake, breaking things, and it was kind of expensive. And then actually in university, I had my first contact with software testing. It was in 2006 when I was working as a working student at IBM in Germany, and they had basically no idea what to do with me. So they put me into software testing back then and said, "Hey, here's a piece of software. Can you test it?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay. Sound interesting. What can go wrong?" So it was not really professional testing back then. I was just clicking around, hoping to find some bugs and to file some issues so that my colleagues would be happy with it. And at the same time, I had a great professor at the university, and he was like into software testing. So he gave me some insights into what kind of books I should read and give me some ideas on what professional software testing means. And basically from then I was pretty much hooked about software testing because I wasn't like the coding guy. There were like people in the university love to write code. Coding was their passion, and for me it was like, nah, it's interesting, but there's more to explore and more to uncover. And so I said to myself, okay, I really want to go into software testing, and I would like to become a software tester in my career. And yeah, so I finished university, I think it was in 2009. And then I got my first job in 2010 as a software test engineer in a company. And yeah, I was basically in heaven, like finding like-minded people, exchanging on the topic, and yeah, became a professional software tester. It was great.
I've got a couple of questions about the earlier part of the story before we get onto your career. So you were building this computer in the 90s. Was that something that your parents introduced you to? I mean, you said you found out about it from a magazine and stuff like that. Was it kind of more independent, and you're just like asking your parents to help you out financing the project, or?
Both. So it was I found it out on my own, basically, when I was just reading the articles and the papers then. But of course I hadn't that. I mean, I was in school, right? I mean, I had no money, basically, right? I had some pocket money left, and I was doing some summer interns as ships to get some money, and I was saving all my income, that like birthday presents and these kind of things, to actually buy computer parts. But of course my parents supported me. They also paid like the biggest portion of the first computer. I think it was in 1994, 1995, something like that. And so they already have seen that, hey, that this might be something, something for the future. And that was great, actually. And then also my friends, they also got started with it. And, then we played together some games, of course. And then we learned more about like how to configure them, how to also to extend them and these kind of things. So.
And did you have the internet available?
Uh, First time internet was 1996, if I remember correctly. So yeah,
Okay, it's I just
some time ago.
the reason I ask is always just to kind of like, there's these different eras in when people are introduced to computing, and it's just so
Yeah.
fascinating to think about the tools you didn't have available to
Hmm.
sort of figure things out, right? No Stack
Hmm.
Overflow, that kind of
No,
stuff.
nothing.
And Actually, just one kind of almost selfish question, but I grew up in a sort of agricultural area in the middle of
Hmm.
Canada.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to ask you, but this is the kind of place where I remember one time actually, we had at my high school, there was a foreign student for a year from somewhere in Germany, and they went the family took him from one city to another. This was in a province called Saskatchewan. And
Hmm.
of course, they were outside the city within 5 minutes. And this is a very flat plain.
Hmm.
The joke being your dog can't run away because you can see him for 3 days. Um, and after about 20 minutes, having not passed another house, this German student said, when's the next city? And they said, well, in 200 kilometers. Um, and they're in this place, farms are just sort of like, you can, I mean, you could just, this is a bit of a caricature, but like, a kind of like square mile, and there's just like a picket fence, or not a picket fence, a post and barbed wire fence, and that's a farm. And it's mostly wheat and canola and things like that people grow. But what did you grow on your farm?
It was like a little tiny farm my grandpa had. We had some, what did we had? We had some cows, we had some pigs, we had two horses, and it was more like something to get everything on your own, like to be on your own with food and vegetables and these kind of things. Yeah. So it was a rather small farm. Nothing big, nothing fancy. We were not selling anything. It was just
Okay.
for our own. Yeah.
I got it. Oh, that's no,
Yeah.
that's just so
Mhm.
interesting. And you mentioned something too about being a working student at
Mhm.
IBM. What does that mean?
I started university in, when was it, 2000 and it's a long time ago. Was it one or two? It doesn't matter. Yeah, I was working. I was studying computer science, and I had a chance to be a working student, like to work in parallel to my university studies at IBM, and yeah, to get some money and to earn some money. And I had the luck to had some local connections there. And so they invited me to for an interview. I wasn't really like advanced in computer science. I mean, I had all this knowledge of assembling computers and these kind of things, but then they asked me like, hey, yeah, sure, like we give you a chance, like you seem like a nice guy. And so I had the time there to actually start with software testing, and I did like during my whole time off at the university. Yeah, so working in parallel.
And you mentioned, and so this introduction to software testing was they kind of didn't know what to do with you, and they sort of
Exactly.
threw you at something where you couldn't sort of like write code
Yeah,
that would break something for the customers or
exactly.
something like
Yeah,
that. And so you were
exactly.
just thrown into sort of clicking around. And what was that like? Did you have to like? It's just so curious because the software testing is a very interesting
Hmm.
job, right? Because, for example, there can often be sort of adversarial kind of, not exactly relationships, but kind of dynamics
Hmm.
involved. And it could be, for example, that some young person on the first day of their job discovers a flaw just by clicking around that someone
Yeah.
senior might have to answer for. Was that a kind of dynamic that you had to find your way through in those early days?
No, not really. I would say it was like it was a storage software that we had that we developed. So for mainframe systems, like I mean IBM, right? I mean, so and it was a storage management system that we had to test, and they gave me some time, of course, to explore the product, to do as actually some exploratory testing. What's like really common these days, because I had no idea, there were no requirements for me what I should look for. So I was like really like signing up on the staging system. I had an account and was just browsing and exploring it, and I had no idea about the product at all, right? So I was asking lots of questions, and at some point, some of the seniors, they got a bit like disappointed by all the questions that I was asking. But exactly, that's the right thing as a software tester to do, right? To ask questions, even though it feels sometimes, you feel not welcome. But that's part of the game, right? To answer, to ask the difficult questions, and to get the thinking starting at the development side, right? So they think about, why did we do it? Is it the right way we have done it, and so forth and so forth. But I was in a lucky position because the people there they were really nice and kind and open-minded. They also supported me okay, this is a test tool that we were using I can't remember the test tool back then. So there was like a testing tool, like a test management system where we were filing bugs, but we had some test automation in place already for the tool. So I had to look into the code as well. So we did also a lot of pair programming together, pair testing. So there were a lot of like right things that I have done, of course, and they teach me, but they haven't told me that's the way how it should be, right? So that was everything a bit mixed up.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. Actually, that you mentioned there, that you hadn't been taught, and you just kind of, partly by, it sounds like, being given the freedom to explore, you kind of found your way to doing the right things naturally. But one thing that I think you've talked about somewhere in a blog post or in a talk is that, or maybe in your book, is that you studied computer science, and software testing is not really taught, generally speaking, in computer science, or at the very least wasn't back then.
No.
And that reminds me of a great metaphor that someone I interviewed for the podcast once, who had a hand in kind of developing computer science curricula in the United States. He said that like version control becoming kind of popular in the last, I don't know, let's say 15 years or something like that, was kind of like a sign of how young computer science was. It was kind of like the surgeons learning to wash their hands. That's the stage. But then there'd be all kinds of, and you can imagine when that happened, there'd be all kinds of people like, I'm a real surgeon, I don't need to wash my hands, and it's always struck me with all the sort of, I've interviewed quite a few people who are into software testing for the podcast, and it's often struck me that we're not at the washing hands stage yet, actually, if we're not, I'm saying we in this sort of cheesy way, but like if we're not at the stage where we're actually like giving people a software testing class in computer science courses, maybe we're actually not at the washing hands stage yet.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I mean, it was similar in my case. I think there was only in one semester at the university we had in software engineering class. It was called, and it was like a bigger project that we had to do as students to develop a piece of software. And there was one or two lectures that covered software testing back then. That's it, right? It was like the testing pyramid, writing unit testing, integration testing, and so forth and so forth. And that's it, right? And that's what the developers learned about software testing in university. And I think that's critical, right? I mean, looking at the industry these days, and also on the complexity of systems that we develop and that we are using on a daily basis. Yeah, it's not just a website or an app that we are using. It's so many systems that are running in the background, and it needs to be configured. And the developers have the quality mindset already in place, because otherwise they will completely screw up in the end, right? So that's definitely a problem I see. And I just talked this week to a university professor, and also like asked him like, hey, what kind of things are you doing for software testing? And yeah, it was the same answer. It was like, yeah, it's just the basics. And he told me that they just have not enough time. They have to cope in so many things in like 6 semesters or in 3-4 years to teach students the fundamental of computer science, like programming and architectural things. But I would wish to have some more testing there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's easy for us to sort of just, breezily say, why don't you teach more of this? And it's like, well, then the obvious answer is, well, then we'll have to teach less of something else, So
exactly.
At the very least, there's going to be 2 other guys complaining about their thing that they care about that we're not teaching. But but at the same time, I mean, but to take it seriously, there are trade-offs. And I've often wondered if, I mean, part of there's just this kind of cultural dynamic, right? And I mean cultural in a sort of like corporate culture kind of sense, where there's people who make stuff and then you hand it off to people and like, see if we made any mistakes, kind of attitude towards testing. Or even I think, I forget who it was, but I interviewed someone a long time ago where they didn't know anything about computer science or anything like that, and they got hired as a software tester. And what that meant was you've got a cubicle in a row of cubicles, and you have literally like a bunch of pages with check boxes, and they got you to open up a piece of software, and the first one was like, click here, click here, click here, click here, click here, record what happened. Click here, click here, click here, click here, click here, record what happened. And of course, if that's what you think software testing is, right? Of course, if you're an ambitious person, or you're a creative person, or you're, what have you, yeah, that's not something you're going to want to do. And that's something that's going to basically, I mean, and we have to take into account the fact that cultures have status in them, right? There's status accorded to certain kinds of things and certain others. But the sort of metaphor you used of your first experience of it as exploring something, particularly in a big company with sort of big established kind of things that they're doing that are very complex.
Yeah.
That idea of exploring and sort of getting to know something that's already been built, is just a very different way of getting into how complex and interesting software testing can be.
Absolutely. Correct.
Yeah. And so anyway, yeah, so we've sort of covered that. And one interesting thing that happened in your career is that you ended up getting into sort of content creation, right? And I think your first way into that was starting your blog.
Exactly.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that happened. There's probably a few people listening who are like, I'd like to be a content creator. What was your inspiration to get the confidence to start? And how did you find the time to do that?
I just also checked it before on my LinkedIn profile when I actually started my blog, because I wasn't able to remember exactly. It was like in October 2011 or November 2011, something like so, more than 10 years now. And it basically happened because I was giving my first talk on a conference. So back then, my company, we had a sponsoring booth at the conference. Agile Testing Days is a pretty common software testing conference in the world. It's also based in Germany. And back then we had an how's it called, sponsored speaking slot at the conference. Usually the side track where nobody would like to talk and nobody would like to go, because it's usually the sales pitch from companies. But I was actually really lucky that my boss back then, she asked me like, hey, Daniel, you just switched over to mobile testing. Don't you think this might be a really nice topic to talk about at a conference? Because it's so new. I mean, it was, I switched to mobile testing end of 2010, and there was literally nothing out there, right? From a tooling perspective, everything was not really mature enough. And I was like, okay, what should I talk about? I was like pretty nervous. And okay, it's like, yeah, let's do it. It was like 20 minutes talk or something at the Agile Testing Days. And I was the only mobile testing talk back then on the conference. And it was just a small room, and it was crowded like crazy. They opened up the doors. The people were sitting outside on the hallway. They actually put some speakers outside that people could listen to my talk. And I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? Because I was talking about like challenges in mobile testing, like what I have seen in the past few months when I was working as a mobile tester. And I spent 2 more days at the conference, but I was literally just giving interviews to people, talking to people. They would like to know more about the topic. And I even got the first request to write a book about it. It's like, okay, wait. That's too fast. I'm just in this field of mobile testing for, it was half a year or something. I need to learn more about it. And then I came back home from the conference, was pretty much hooked and like full of adrenaline somehow, because I wasn't, but also in a shocked state, I would say. It was like, what's going on here? This might be a hot topic for people back then. And so I thought, okay, what can I do? I mean, I got also invited to many other conferences to give the same talk again. And at the same time, I had the feeling that I just need to learn more about it. But what I have seen and I have felt on the conference was I need to share it with others. So that's why I said, okay, let's create a blog. I had no idea. I had no ambition to be anytime soon to be an author. To have some year later to have a YouTube channel or something like that. I was just would like to use the blog to share my knowledge. And also the main purpose for creating it back then was also to reflect on the things that I've learned, and also the things that I have made in the daily business as a mobile tester back then. I was trying out so many tools that were on the market back then, and I wrote about them. I was like, okay, this is not working out because of X, Y, Z, and how to integrate into CI/CD, and all these kind of things. I was just writing down after work hours at home, because I had the feeling that it's useful for others that would like to come into that field. And I was shocked. I got so many great feedback on the blog, and keep me busy. The next few years, I really loved it, because I had people loved it. They're just like, hey, keep on going. That's so interesting. We learned so many things from it. So that was actually my step into content creation. Again, I would say a coincidence, because my former boss back then said, "Hey, you have some cool topic that you're working on right now, so why not giving a talk?" And it was like a little tiny stone that got pushed, and then it's still rolling.
And speaking of it still rolling, so let's skip ahead to now. What do you do in your current role at Myborn Wolf?
Yeah, unfortunately, not really like hands-on mobile testing anymore. I'm now a head of software testing at Myborn Wolf. It's a clean management position. Yeah, so we are testing software for all kinds of clients within Germany at the moment. So we're focusing at the moment on the German-speaking market. And the department that I'm heading with another colleague is we are 36 people now, with all kinds of backgrounds in software testing. We have technical people, really like test automation engineers, software engineering tests. We have also really great people that are great in creating test strategies, test management, managing big projects, big clients in terms of testing, in terms of quality, and handling the people, helping them to grow, help them to learn new things, explore new topics, and then also to help our clients, consult our clients, and to actually advocate for more quality in the products they build.
And is part of that job, so I can imagine, so one version of it might be, we've got a product and we need someone to test it. But another version might be, we've got a product and we want to learn how to do testing ourselves.
Yes,
is that part of it as well? So helping to work with them to come up with the right testing strategy for their, and exactly. Is that, I imagine, it's obviously got to be very different from product to product or industry to industry, right? Like, for example, in banking or aviation, testing might have very different kind of levels of requirements.
Absolutely.
And that leads me to, I know this is, you've talked about it on your YouTube channel, but that leads me to the question of testing certifications. And I was wondering if you could just take a few minutes to talk about that, because I know that can be a controversial kind of issue in the software testing world for all kinds of sort of important reasons. And so people might not be, might be a little bit surprised to hear that there could be controversies in software testing world, but there are. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that and maybe your position on it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, software certification or testing certifications are, I don't know which words I used in my YouTube video, but it's a hot topic. It's like you can easily start a fight when talking to a person on that topic, because there are some bad testing certificates on the market. Yeah, I would say, but on the other side, there are also some good ones on the market. Yeah, so there are some on the market where you really have to study for getting the certificate, right? You learn for some weeks on the topic, some months, you exchange with people on the topic, you learn for the exam. It's also a written exam. And then sometimes there are exams that you just have to learn either on your own, like on a book or on the syllabus, or you go into a class. And then at the end, you have to do a multiple choice test. And you have to really follow the words that are in the exam. And this is like really, I think there's too many boundaries when we talk about software testing, because software testing is so complex. Yeah. So that's the controversial part, that some people think that it's not really knowledge that you gain. It's just passing an exam. Yeah. It's like, opening up your brain, putting everything in, do the exam, and then close it and never use the knowledge again. This is the bad reputation on software testing certificates. I have to say they are useful because you might get a first job, right? Especially if you're, let's say, a junior software test engineer and you would like to get your first testing job. The certificate might help you to get a job, right? Because you already you tell the company that you have learn something about testing and that you pass something, right? But still you have to grow on that fundamentals that you have learned in the certificates. That's important. Or if you're freelance software tester, for example, and you would like to get the next project, that's also helpful, because as you mentioned, some industries, they completely rely on these kind of certificates. Yeah. Being in banking, for example, they really want to have people that are certified, because it might be part of their own certification process or their own audit system that they have in place. So they have to assure that all the people that work for them have at least this and that certificate, right? So for them, it's just like a safety net. So that's why it's also important to have it. Yeah. On the other side, I also know really great software testers in the community that have no single certificate, but they are really awesome and great. So that's the thing, right? So it's always the you have to find a balance. Do you really need it for your job? Yeah. Or do you just want to have it and to have it somewhere in your CV that you have this kind of testing certificate? I only have what do I have? I have two or three of them, but I don't need them in my current role, right? It's just I have them, and that it's almost 10, 12 years ago that I have that I made them or got them. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that really great nuanced answer, right? I mean, I think it's important often when we sort of look at these things to understand that there's, there's people looking at this from all kinds of different perspectives and different interests, right? And so if you're exactly. If you're, say, like not in a technical role, but you're in, say, a kind of managerial role, and something goes wrong and people ask you, well, who'd you have working on that? And you can say, well, I followed the guideline. At least you can say, well, I followed the guidelines and I only hired people who have these certifications, at least, those there's actually can be kind of very good reasons to have sort of mechanisms like that in place, often, especially if people are kind of, at a certain level, and if especially in very hierarchical organizations, at a certain level, there's kind of zero domain expertise in the mind of the person who's sort of responsible for that domain, responsible at a certain level of abstraction anyway. And so these kinds of things can be very important and play an important role. But of course, that means you need to be aware, like, of why it exists for kind of procedural and bureaucratic reasons. And it doesn't really mean anything in itself, but you still have to do it.
Yeah, sometimes. Exactly. Or if you have the recruiters, for example, or HR department, if they filter for applicants and they don't have like their checklist or the certificates, so that might be also like the first step to pass that barrier.
That's interesting. That reminds me too of something you said there, which is sometimes when you take some of the not so good kind of certifications, it's you learn the words, the arbitrary words they alighted upon in their exam creation, and then you just sort of learn to spot the pattern of words in the multiple choice options given to you. But at another level of communication, actually, is a really, really important skill when it comes to words, and recognize, and like even being able to recognize those word patterns actually is an important skill, right? Because I imagine when you sort of are working on a new code base, you have to kind of learn the internal language that developed around that code base that the programmers have, but then you have to learn what the business side of things, how the words that they have too, right, in order to report to them what the problems are and what caused them. So you have to learn these different languages.
Yeah. I mean, that's anyways one of the key skills software testers should have, right? Is this communication and interpersonality skills, to be able to talk with developers a different language than talking with the product manager or with the designer or with, an external stakeholder or with the customers, for example, right? So that's sometimes always, I think it's a really challenging part of the software tester, but it's really really important to have these communication skills.
Yeah, I think I spoke to someone once who sort of somewhat tongue-in-cheek was like, when you're speaking to the sort of people responsible for the business side, you always speak in terms of revenue, and exactly. and this will save you this much money, or this will make you this much money. And then when you're talking maybe to the programmers, it'll be like, this will save you this much time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just to ask kind of a cheesy question, but I imagine, being in the software testing yourself, you probably get versions of this from time to time at the pub, or kind of, when you're introduced to a new in-law or something like that, which is every once in a while you hear about these giant initiatives that just completely fail, healthcare.gov, and that's becoming a bit of a dated reference, but that was a big deal in the United States a while ago, with huge political implications for it. We've got a long-running thing in Canada right now about, what sounds simple, which was like a payment system for the federal government employees. That's just it's just a giant steaming pile of poo, and it has been for a long time, with incredible amounts of money spent on it, and it still kind of doesn't work, and even to the point of people not getting paid. And so if someone asks you, oh, hey, you're in software testing, how is it that people can spend literally $1 billion on a software system and then it just doesn't work? How can that happen?
Yeah.
So that's my pub table question for you.
It's actually a tough question. I mean, it's not that easy, right? I mean, it's when software testers usually come in place, or in many cases, sometimes it's too late. Yeah. like, I mean, especially in these kind of projects, like really like big environmental or like big governmental projects, it takes years, for them to design something and to write their books and their requirements, and that's not the way it should be, right? It should be they should involve software testers, developers, designers as early as possible, like in an agile way, right? To be in a discovery phase, in an early process, to gather the insights and ask also the customers, like what is the problem that we should solve. And this is not going to happen. This kind of big projects, right? It's software testers just come too late to that stage where they should work and they should find the topics. Yeah, and that's what I say. It's usually the biggest problem, and also that the bigger projects get. You have to how's the word? You have to make a public offer, like a public request for the project, right? So many companies, they can come together and to work with it and to build the product, and then sometimes it's provider A, provider C, and D and E, and they don't know each other, but they have to work together. So they are not having the same development standards. They don't work in the same language. They may be working in different time zones, and all those implications, this ends up in such a huge mess, right? I mean, that's in the end, it comes down to people and to communication, and also to, of course, to misplanning of the project, right? I mean, it's just like too big. It's just, you cannot foresee all the different edge cases that might occur on such a big thing. Yeah, but you have to, of course, you have to start at some point. But yeah, bring people together as early as possible, I would say, and then they will do something great. But usually also with politics and all these kind of things, it's maybe the wrong people get addressed to the topic as well, right? Also from a higher management position. And I mean, we have the same situations in Germany. We have all kinds of projects that completely failed on such a big level in the same way, right? I mean, developing software for years or building product for years that nobody will use, or in the end it will be rejected by the EU, for example, because it doesn't comply to the laws and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, we could probably talk for a long time about regulation as well, and how crucial and sometimes arbitrary regulation and changes in regulation can be, and how those can impact the way you have to sort of design and implement things. Speaking of, just one last question I have about this before we go on to talk about your book, the idea of like people coming together to work together who might come from different perspectives and have different skill sets. They might also have different perceptions of their own and each other's skill sets as well. And you've developed this tool, I guess, called the testing wheel, to help manage that kind of thing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what inspired that idea and how that works.
Okay. Yeah, I basically copied the testing wheel from the product wheel. Got created by Petra Wille. She's a German product expert, also in the Greater Hamburg region. And I read her book. It's called Strong Product People, and there she wrote about how basically to develop people on a certain scale of things. Yeah, and I kind of like the idea of, okay, this is like a really nice and easy framework that you can use in order to talk about different topics with your direct reports, for example, or with your own manager. So I derived the testing wheel. I think it has 8 categories with agile working, test automation or testing in general, communication skills, growth plans, and so forth and so forth. And what I do with the testing wheel is I explain each category to my direct reports, tell them, okay, this is the categories that we have in the company. And then they should rank themselves. How do they see themselves on the testing wheel, for example, in the technical testing part? Do they think they are on the outer end? So everything is perfect. I know everything. Or do they see themselves like at the very center of the wheel? So they need to get more help and more guidance. They do it on their own for themselves, and I do it for them, how I see them. And then we put the testing wheel together, and then we see, okay, they're like, okay, there's, let's say, technical testing skills. One colleague says, okay, he knows everything. And I say, okay, he's in the middle of the range, right? So there's a gap. So we should talk about it. So why he thinks or she thinks she is perfect, and I think there's room for improvement. It's not for I don't use it to judge people and to rank them in some sort of hierarchy or next salary increase or something. I use it as a personal growth framework to actually help the people and show them like, look, that's what you think and that's what I think, and it's easily also to be extended with others in the team. For example, ask someone to fill in the testing wheel or the wheel itself for him or her to just get some feedback. And that's the main purpose for me, to bring the people together to talk about their perception of their work and how they see themselves and where do they see room for improvement. And that's I really like it. There's so many great discussions going started, and yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, no, yeah, it struck me as a really great idea, and there is a bit of a sort of bracing element to it as well, right? As friendly as it can be in the end, evaluating yourself and others is an important exercise to go through for teamwork, and to sort of step back and go like, we're all doing jobs here, and it is important for us to kind of be objective about ourselves and each other from time to time, even if we might not always like what we hear.
Of course.
So moving on to the next part of the interview, where we talk about your book, we'll talk about hands-on mobile app testing. We'll talk about, in the last part, we'll talk about how it's actually, in a sense, a second edition. And I'm really interested in talking about that story. But I want to say this is a really, really good book for anyone interested in this subject. And it's grounded in history, which I found fascinating. You have this section near the beginning where you talk about the history of basically mobile telephony, and which starts in the 70s, and at least along one timeline. There's always ways of teasing it earlier with any kind of technology, right? But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. How did we get from the sort of first sort of, I guess huge, they weren't even bricks, they would have been blocks or something like that, that might have been in trucks or something like that, to where we are with 5G today.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 60 years, almost 60 years ago, right? I mean, imagine back then, I think the first one, they were mounted, as you said, to trucks. They were only able to pick up the phone and just talk one direction. So it was not bidirectional. So it was only one way communicating, right, through it. And that was amazing. And then, of course, there were like companies, I can't remember all of the companies that were back then like involved into the development of the networks, and the establishment of the first 1G network, basically, where you were able to have the first phone call in both ways, in both directions, but still it was mounted to big trucks and to big stations, right? It wasn't really mobile back then. And then I think the biggest milestone that happened was the 2G, or later on the GPRS technology, when we move into the 80s, right? Where we had the very first phones that were, I don't know how tall they were, like really big ones, and the battery was not really lasting for an hour or something. And when people were using them was maybe in upper management, or I don't know, kind of companies were really busy managers using the phones back then. I mean, we all know the Hollywood movies where you can see the I think it was a Motorola. I'm not good in history. I think it was the Motorola phone back then. What you have seen on television, and then of course, I mean, the industry was evolving, the market was there, the people have seen the benefits of using mobile phones, and then it evolved from the 2G networks over to 3G, where you had really like a faster internet, right? And then I think also the big accelerator back then was basically the first iPhone in 2007. Before that, we had what we had. We had Nokia's, we had Samsung, Ericsson, all the BlackBerry devices with physical keyboard, small screen, really bad resolution. You were not able to extend the device with apps. You had some browser capabilities, I would say. You were able to get some more information, or some information from some websites. I mean, at the same time, the internet was just like growing. It was a parallel growth, basically. And then, I mean, in 2007, then when Apple introduced the first iPhone, I think that was the revolution, right? I mean, I still remember the interview with Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, saying, this will never be a success, where he was laughing, and this was also part of one of my book, that when I talked on a conference to a guy and talking about mobile testing, where he totally underestimated the mobile testing. Like, it's just software and a small thing. And then 1 or 2 years later, he also gave a big talk about mobile testing. So what I'm always also I've written in the book is that never underestimated technology, right? It might look really small and tiny, but it can be the next big thing. Yeah, of course there might be some failures in between. We had this already also in the past in technology, but yeah, mobile is here to stay, I would say. And then, of course, after Apple introduced the iPhone, then we had the first Android phone coming up, and then we know where we are at the moment, right? We have the different mobile networks that had to be developed because of the data speeds and the use cases that we have. I mean, now we have 5G. We can stream music, videos, have video conference calls everywhere, wherever we want to have the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing that great sort of very high level history. It is interesting. One thing you captured there was how back in the day, having a mobile phone meant you were an important person.
Exactly.
This is something that I think, like sort of, we've dated ourselves already, but you kids these days might not know that, like in the olden times, like that meant that was it wasn't even a status symbol. It was a sign of kind of that you were doing something important. And time sensitive that required this special technology, and then sort of course miniaturization became a sort of feature. When phones became more commonplace, then the smaller the phone, the more important a person you were somehow. There was a great Saturday Night Live sketch with Will Ferrell, I think, where like he was playing like a kind of important fashion designer or something, and he had this little phone that was like the size of a fingernail or something like that. But it is interesting because the revolution that the iPhone represented, right, where the whole face of it, I think that for the first one, the whole face was already a screen, right? And it was touch. No, there would have been a button at the bottom.
The button, yeah.
But most of the face was a screen, and then actually you kind of wanted phones to be bigger. You didn't want them to be as small as you could possibly make them. But basically, what a lot of people would have missed is that this is not just this is not just a phone anymore, and B, there's a lot more to it than it just being like a desktop computer in your pocket. And just to hone in on that last part, because you write about this very well, that mobile phones are, it's not just a computer that can talk to other computers or something like that. There are all these sensors and sort of ways of interacting with them that are very different from any other computing device that you're going to use, which brings all these fascinating challenges. Because we were talking, all the testing we've been talking about so far is like with a keyboard in front of a screen, basically. But now you've got something that's like got a sensor on the inside, like let's say with a watch, that's looking at your heart rate, and then that might be like associated with data coming in from like a magnet that's sort of in the phone that's sort of sensing what direction you're facing, and then that might have something in it like a gyroscope that can tell whether you're going up whether you're going up and down and how much you're going up and down, and then that might be communicating with a satellite to tell you what mountain you're snowboarding down.
Exactly.
Your snowboarding app. And it's like, how do you test that? Well, you kind of have to go snowboarding.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, that's also a big part of the book. I mean, telling the readers that they have to test the app where the customers will use it in the end. Yeah, depending on the app use case, you have to go outside on a mountain, for example, if you would like to test the features for a snowboarder, right? I mean, it's testing it in a cozy office in a strong Wi-Fi network with 22 degrees in the office. It's a nice cozy environment. But imagine being outside on a mountain, wearing big clothes and everything, and you have goggles on it. You cannot really see what's going to happen on the screen, and you have maybe cold fingers, or you have special gloves for touching on the screen, and this all adds to the result of the product in the end. And this is something that you have to see in real life, that you have to test in real life and also in the real environment. And I was speaking of data networks. I mean, maybe on top of the mountain, all good, you have 5G network, but going down in the valley, you might have no internet at all. What's going to happen with the app in that situation? Is the data being sent, and so forth and so forth? And These are so many scenarios that you have to first of all, to find out when working in mobile testing and for your app, to write them down and to make them transparent also within the team, so that everybody knows, okay, that's what we're building for the products, the company, on the customers. Then you can build something good.
Yeah, and so what are some of the sort of like high level kind of strategies that you
Mm-hmm.
talk about in the book? I guess you could take a few minutes to talk about those that are sort of unique to
Mm-hmm.
mobile
Mm-hmm.
testing.
Yeah, I have one chapter talking about basically the challenges of mobile testing. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that you have is, of course, the different devices. Device fragmentation is a big topic still on the market. I mean, it was a huge topic on Android back then, when there were, I mean, it's still a huge topic on Android, right? Where you have like 20 to 30,000 of different hardware software configurations available on the market. And back then, the iOS developers were always laughing at, haha, we have only one device with one operating system version and everything works. But also device fragmentation is now a topic on iOS. Yeah. So you have, I mean, I think it's a good thing that we have device fragmentation on iOS, because Apple is really giving support for older devices in terms of software updates, in terms of security. That's good for the developers, and for testers, it adds more complexity to it, because you have to support older devices, slower phones, slower hardware, and so forth and so forth. So that's one of the biggest challenges that you have to tackle in your testing strategy for mobile apps. So I read so many blog posts about it, that you should gather information about your customers, right? Know who is using your app in the end. And if you know that, you can see what kind of devices are they using. If you know that they have only on Android, let's say 2-3 manufacturers, focus on those manufacturers and OS versions that they use. Same on iOS. So to narrow down the complexity of the devices, because nobody can test on thousands of devices on each cycle of an app release, and it's also way too expensive to handle all those things. So that's one thing that I usually tell them. And then also talking about mobile test strategies, then what we just had as the example before, make everyone clear what we are building for. What's the app purpose? What problem will the app solve? Yeah, being it a sports activity app, is it a business app? Is it an app for shopping and these kind of things? And then note down some scenarios that can impact the app later on in the wild, in real customers' hands, and then to derive from that knowledge, derive things that you would like to do in your daily life as a software or mobile tester. Yeah, testing for the different sensors, for example, might be one thing, or testing for third-party app integrations, for example. I had once a really nice bug that we had a calendar export in the product that I was testing back then. And we were just exporting the data to the phone, and we said, oh, okay, there's a calendar on Android, there's a calendar on iOS, it's working out. But then I was thinking like, hey, we have an app store, we can install other apps. So I would check what's the top rated calendar app, not from Android or not coming from iOS. So I downloaded them, I used them, it was a completely nightmare. Nothing was working. So no data synchronization was going to happen, and these kind of things. So that's important. What I mean with the testing strategies, yeah, and then of course to test in the different for different sensors. Yeah, if you use one finger, two finger rotating, pinch to zoom, landscape portrait is really a nice thing to test on all apps that you have, because you can find easily lots of bugs, yeah, on that side. On the other side, what you also should keep in mind is that mobile users, they have really high expectations to their own devices. So you get a phone for $1,000. It's a lot of money. And at the same time, the mobile device is a really personal device for them. They have their banking on it. They book their holidays. They have their pictures from the family. They have their movies on there. So they have everything in this little tiny thing. And they have really high expectations also to the software that is running on the system. So that's why you have to keep in mind that users tend to delete an app pretty fast if they don't like it, go to the competitor. And that's why you have to be also keen on the whole thing of usability testing, performance testing, and security. That's also usually a topic that is, companies that don't want to pay for it. Yeah, let's say so. They just want to get the features out, and then they hope and pray that nobody will hack the system, no data breach is going to happen. But this is bad. Yeah, this is bad. And this is also something that you should put into your testing strategy. And there's so many things to think about. Yeah,
yeah,
that.
Yeah, no, that's really great. That's really great. I mean, it's interesting that trying to just grasp all the complexity of, sort of like you were saying, device fragmentation, and then different devices talking to each other across different operating systems and stuff like that, and different apps. But that idea or reality of high user expectation just really loads on the weight, right? Because people, as you said, they have all these things on there, but like partly, I think it's like partly because we can have them in our hands and we can wave them around and we tap on them. I'm doing this with no one can see, but I'm doing it with my phone in front of the screen right now. We relate to people still use the word virtual, but like, when they talk about doing things on screens sometimes, but it's a tool. And when you pick up a hammer and you're hammering a nail, you don't want to think about the hammer, right? Like it's just, you don't want to think about it at all. I'm hammering. You're not even thinking that you are hammering when you're using it. And imagine if you hit the nail and there was like a slight delay between the hitting the nail and it actually like being hit, if you know what I mean, right? Like, you'd be like, now I can't hammer with it anymore, and you'd throw the hammer away. And this is kind of what happens when people like they'll go to download an app and it's like, oh, the app didn't work. Well, delete. And off, this might have been your dream startup. It's going to change the world. I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs. And like, no, everybody forgot about it a minute later. And so I like one thing that I think you recommend is, and this might seem kind of trivial if you've never built anything. The first thing you should do after you launch an app is download it yourself.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I mean, it's also in the book. It's called the update testing. It's something that you definitely should do before an app release, right? I mean, simulate the update process of the app before submitting it to the app stores, because I mean, we also had a situation. That's why I put it in the book, because it happened to me personally. So we were like, it's sometimes when you build releases, it's sometimes a rush. We need to get it out. Let's do it. And I was talking to the developer. Hey, can you do the update testing for me? Because I don't have enough time because I have to do on other things. And he said, yes, yeah, I've done it. I will do it. And then we submitted, and I said, okay, I completely trusted him, saying, okay, let's go for it. And then we pushed the button, and it takes some time until the apps are available. Android, it takes some hours. On Apple, it takes a bit longer. And then I went home, and then like right in the middle of commuting back home, he called me like, Daniel, we have an issue. The app is crashing right away after we downloaded it from the App Store. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Did you do the update test? And he's like, okay, it's silence. So he completely forgot about it. And we had a database migration topic back then. So we had the mobile database that was on the phone. There was like a corrupted field, and updating from the old to the latest version crashed the app. There was no chance of repairing it. The app was broken. And imagine the user has a broken app and he might never come back. Yeah. So that's why it's important to think of all these kind of scenarios. Yeah. I usually use the metaphor of, remember the magazines back then when they had these CDs on it. You have a baked piece of software on a CD and it's shipped to the customers. It's same with apps. If you have everything in the app and you cannot control something from a backend or from an API perspective, for example, the app is out there on a device of a user, and if the user is lazy in updating the app, he or she will not get the latest update of the phone. And if auto update is disabled, for example, right, you might have lost the customer. So that's why it's important to think about this case.
And when it comes to sort of methods and strategies for dealing with all this complexity, there is one thing called crowd testing, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, it's also part 6 of the book. Yeah, chapter 6. I'm talking about alternative mobile testing techniques, and crowd testing is definitely something that you can integrate in your daily life in the software development. And so crowd testing, as the name already suggests, is you give the piece of software, being it a mobile app or being it a web application or any kind of software, you give it to a crowd, like to a broader audience of people. And there are providers out there, so like crowd testing providers. they offer a grout to you, so you can basically get a grout for some euros or dollars, and with that you can tell the cloud provider, okay, I need specific personas. For example, I need a different age group, different interests on that testing group, and then you give the product to that group, and they test the product for you. So there might be customers, there might be crowd testers, and they give feedback, fresh feedback outside from your perspective, right? So you can also call them beta testers or early customer testing and these kind of things. And then you get feedback through the crowd provider. So these testers can be housewives, mechanics, teachers, students, all kinds of people can sign up on those platforms, and they test your product based on your requirements. And then you get some feedback. Yeah. So that's basically what crowd testing is all about.
Just before we move on to the last part of the interview where we talk about your work as a writer, I wanted to ask you about I guess it's been around for a while in various forms, but the sort of next frontier in all this kind of testing complexity is the Internet of Things. And I was just wondering if you could sort of, I know you've talked about it recently in a video on your YouTube channel, but just very briefly, what are some of the interesting challenges yet unique to the Internet of Things that testers are going to have, people who are like, test strategy crafters are going to have to face going forward?
Yeah, IoT is another level of complexity, I would say, because it's, there's so many things that can be an IoT device, right? It can be like a small button that you could put somewhere, and that this is able to communicate already with your mobile device, for example. So it's all kinds of different sensors and technologies, and also built in, for example, in fridges, washing machines, and these kind of things. So everything can be an Internet of Thing, like it can be connected to the internet and can send data in all kinds of fashion. So it doesn't need to have a screen, for example. So it might be completely just a microprocessor or microcomputing system that is collecting data from, let's say, environmental data. It's something that farmers use quite heavily to gather some feedback on the temperature, on the humidity, on the fields, for example, and to send those data to a server and then to give some guidance. And this adds a lot of complexity, especially because you have to test again everything together. So the isolated testing at IoT or in IoT is not the biggest challenge, because you test on, let's say, on the IoT device, you can test the communication, you can test the backend, everything separately. But then in the end, you have to test end to end everything together. And that's a huge challenge, actually, because this is really hard to automate, especially if you think about technical hardware that is really like sitting somewhere, as I said, this farming example, right, in the middle of nowhere. So you have to build up the infrastructure in a lab situation, or you have to talk to a farmer or to get some beta testers and these kind of things to gather the real insights, because such an IoT device is also affected by the environmental surroundings like rain and sun, going back to the farming example. And this adds all to the complexity of IoT testing. Yeah, so that's the big challenge, and it's I would say it's more technical. It's even more technical than mobile testing. Yeah, because you have to really go into the code, check the logs, write some scripts, even more than mobile testing to gather the insights.
Just moving on to the last part of the interview where we talk about your, as I just said a moment ago, about your experience writing. So your book, Hands-on Mobile App Testing, is actually a second edition, the one that's available on EPUB right now, and that we'll talk about the print version on Amazon as well. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the first edition and how that came about, and who the publishing company you worked with on that project.
I think I started the book. Actually, was the idea that came when I was home alone. I think it was 2014. I was home alone. My wife was not there. I was sitting, reading my blog, seeing all the good feedback, and saying, "Okay, why not starting a book?" that was basically the start. And I was like, "Okay, why not? Let's see if I can make it, right?" And I just outlined the chapters, what I would like to do, I would like to add in the book, and so forth and so forth. I did some research, what kind of books are on the market, and all these kind of things. And then I just started with writing. Yeah. And fun fact, I don't know if you know it, but at the first edition, I also published with LeanPub in the very beginning.
Oh, I didn't know that. No.
It is. I published with Leanpub, so I also wrote with all the with Markdown. I wrote it with Markdown completely because I wanted really to focus on the text, on the content, and not with all the the boilerplate of having some like with Word or other tools that you can use in formatting text. So I was writing it, and I was using Leanpub back then because I had no experience with publishing. I had no experience with how to sell, how to market a book, and Leanpub back then. It was perfect for me because it was easy. It was easy for me to sign up. It was easy to set up. It could really focus on writing, and so I published. I published on Leanpub, and I was pretty happy with the first outcome. I think the book published in when was it? End of 2014. I almost wrote for 1 year on the book. I think it was completely 1 year in my spare time in vacation every day, and then I got contact via my testing network to a publisher. It's like, hey, do you want to have a real book? Because back then I was like, yeah, an ebook is really nice, it's cool, but I had the feeling like, okay, I would to have something in my hands, like a real book. And this print on demand services back then, I don't know if they were already established back then. And then the publishing company, they approached me like, hey, yeah, we would like to publish your book. So yeah, sounds great. And then I had to take it down from Leanpub back then, of course, and I gave them all the rights, so they were printing it, they were selling it, and now last year I contacted them saying, "Hey, look, there are some parts outdated in the book. The link sources are not valid anymore, most of them, because tools are not there on the market anymore, or the URLs have changed, and the chapters have to rework, and so forth and so forth." And they were not really interested in the topic. I don't know why. They didn't give me any insights, like why maybe it was not selling enough for them. Yeah, because I guess so, because otherwise they would have asked for the second edition. And then I said, okay, then can I get the rights back? Because I put so many hours into the book and so much love to it. And it helped so many people. I don't want to let the project die. Yeah. So, and then it took them ages. I think it was 7 or 8 months until they told me like, hey, you can get your rights back. And then the first natural thing was, okay, I go with Leanpub again. Yeah. So I set up everything again. I even had my account because I also wrote the other book, Smartwatch App Testing, and set everything up. And it was still the same smooth experience as back then. It was really, really great. I took time to rework the chapters and everything. And then I think last week I hit publish on the book, and just see how the users would like it, my readers.
Yeah, that's a really great story. I did not know that the first edition of the first edition was published on Leanpub. And just for anyone listening, to have someone publish a book on Leanpub and then have to take it down because they got bought by a publisher, that's great. Like, to us, that's a hugely successful outcome, and that's awesome. And we have a feature called Unpublishing a Book that's there partly for that reason. I'm very curious about, so this is something that people in the self-publishing world write about a lot, which is, and in the publishing world generally about rights and stuff like that. So you got when the publisher got the rights to your book, they you signed a contract with them, and there was agreements about royalties and stuff like that. But years later, you actually got it back just by asking, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
It took a while, but you just asked and they gave them back.
Exactly. Yeah. I asked them like, hey, how about the second edition? Because again, I got feedback from many readers like, hey, look, it's outdated. Also some Amazon reviews, they were like really bad, saying, oh, the link's not working anymore. This is wrong and this is outdated. I mean, it was there for more than 7 years. I mean, of course it's outdated. Yeah. What else in technology, right? And then I contacted them saying, hey, let's talk. What do you think? Let's do a second edition. And they were like, we don't know. Let's see. And then at some point I asked them, okay, then give me your rights back, or my rights back, and they agreed. That's great, actually.
Yeah, no, that is really great, and it's interesting too, because sometimes the book publishing world can be very unforgiving, but there's other interactions you can have with people in the book publishing world where it's the long term and it's relationships that matter as well. And if you're a publisher and you care about your reputation and stuff like that, if authors who are passionate about what they do, and a book is in some ways a unique kind of product where it's very often very one person directed, and it takes over their life, as you say, your vacations and weekends, telling your family, and why is mommy in the why isn't mommy coming out to the park today? Well, she's got to work on her book, kind of thing. And then if a book isn't making money for a publisher anymore, and if it's even just getting complaints and stuff like that, and the author's like, hey, can I have it back? I want to do more with it. It actually is something that can happen, that where they will just give it to you, just like you described. And it is, but I would say, don't count on it. If you're thinking of signing a contract with a publisher, I mean, this is not legal advice or anything like that, but like you should have a worst case scenario mindset when it comes to the language that you agree to.
Definitely.
And you can actually have you can have clauses like if and when blah blah the rights revert to me.
Exactly. The good thing is that I always had a really good relationship with the publisher. It was always great. The support was great at the beginning, and then once got published, everything was really cool. And so why not? I mean, they were also fine with it, I guess. So that's the thing, and I like it. I mean, I have the reference in the book that it was previously published with the other publisher, and that's the legal part. And then I'm fine with it. They're also fine.
And you've got a print version up on Amazon. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I checked for the print on demand services, because I think that again, many readers, they would like to have a physical copy of something, especially on a technical book that they would like. I mean, I'm the same person. I have to say, I have many ebooks, but having a physical copy of something at home at my desk, where I can mark something, put post-its on it, and can come back later. I'm more that kind of person, and I think that was the reason why I would love to have also a print-on-demand service available. And I heard so far good things on the Amazon print-on-demand service. I talked to some people and I signed up. I uploaded the documents. I had to rework a bit of the designs. The formatting was a bit different, and I ordered an author copy. I got it. It was okay-ish, and I had to adjust again a bit. And now it's also on sale on Amazon. So let's see how it goes. It's just out since since yesterday or so. It's available. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And actually, this is one of the reasons we saved this kind of talk for the last part of the interview, because we really get into the weeds. But this issue of outdated links in books is a long running one, and you've got a sort of solution that you've devised to this issue in your book that I actually have never seen before. And I was wondering, I mean, it might not be unique to you, but that this is the first time I've seen it. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your approach there.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was thinking about that for quite some time. Like, okay, how can I solve the outdated link topic again for the second edition? And so I thought of using my blog in between. So have basically a proxy in between the link pages, the links that I have in my book. So all the links in my book, they have the chapter title, like the chapter number plus a number, just increasing number. And this links to a specific book page, a specific page on my blog. Yeah. And on my blog, I have the link that should have been in the book. Yeah. So the links inside the book will always point to my blog. And on my blog, I will make sure that the links that fit to that text sentences or to that story will always be up to date. Yeah, so I make sure that these links are always valid. So no matter if you bought the book in, let's say, 2-3 years, the links in the book are valid, and on my blog they will change, but will give you the same kind of information. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just on the off chance that's not clear, I'll put it in my words, but it's a very interesting thing, which is basically every link in the book would appear with something like CH-02, right? Then the next one would be it would be like CH2-03. Or CH2-04, and that would be it's chapter 2, and it's the third link. It's chapter 2, and it's the fourth link. Yeah. And every time you click a link, you go to this in the book. You go to the same page on Daniel's blog, but then you look up CH03, CH-03, and then there's a link there, and that's the thing that you're maintaining and keeping live all the time.
Exactly.
So you match the code in the book to the code on the page, and that's the link, and that's a super interesting way of keeping it live. And one of the reasons I say that is because like it would work for a print book as well, which is probably one of the reasons you did it, right? Like you could put the link, the web address in the print book to that one single page, and it's like you will find here maintained updated links for all the links in this book.
Exactly.
And that's just it's a really interesting way of solving that problem. The last question I always like to ask on the podcast, if the guest is a Leanpub author, is if there was one terribly broken, awful thing that frustrated you to no end and had you shouting at the screen when you were using Leanpub, or if there was one magical feature we could build for you, can you think of anything that you would ask us to do?
Magical thing. That's a good question. One thing that I found confusing the last days was the menu structure. When you are an author, you have your bookshelf, and then you have the settings, you have the community tab, and then sometimes for me, I mean, it was just like the very first time, it was a bit confusing where to find all the subsections of coupons, royalties, settings for progress bar, and these kind of things. This was a long list of things. So that was a bit. It was not a big deal. I had to look it up, right? I have to really read through it. It was not clear in the very beginning for me. So that was something I would wish for. And for the real cool thing would be, I mean, having a print on demand service included would be really awesome to not go somewhere else. But I think this is a really big challenge to tackle with printing, cutting, sending out books. So this would be perfect. This would be like the really perfect thing.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing both of those. When it comes to menus and navigation, this is, I mean, you know, we're better than we used to be, and there's always room for improvement. But you know, one of our shortcuts for that, which is we don't really surface this, but we talk about the author app, which is basically like if you're an author and you're working on books, creating books, stuff like that, we have the kind of author app side of things. In there, when you create a book or a course or a bundle, there's an overview page for it, where we set everything out in sections, but you know, it's like 30 links, right? Each page has its own title, and it's like about, you know, or about, which we then later called about the book, right? You know, realizing we need to be a bit more explicit, but you know, but what even that, like, okay, so but what's really good, we have one page called generation settings. And it's like, well, I mean, I that gives me some clue about what kind of thing is going to be in there, but it doesn't actually tell me what's going to be in there. And so our various ways around it is to try to name the pages properly, try to have, you know, have the right amount of pages so that, like, you know, it's not all, you know, all your book settings are in one page, because that can be really hard to find.
That's true.
The other way, the main tool I guess we have for that is our help center, which is like, you know, where can I set, you know, this or that, like, you know, what percent complete is my book, or how, like, the progress of the book. And we try to use keywords as well. And then we have screenshots, like, here's the page, and go to your book overview page and then click on about the book, and then you'll find the blah, blah, blah. But that's just an ongoing challenge. And we really appreciate feedback about that, because, you know, most of the time people just live with it. And this is not true just with Leanpub, but with anything, people just live with it, and sort of actually hearing back from people is really good. And when it comes to, the magical make a print copy of my book available, I mean, we've had that request before. You know, it's possible that someday some third party print on demand service is going to approach us and just go, hey, why don't we make a partnership? We'll work with you, blah, blah. So, like, I mean, it's possible that someday something like that will happen. But as you know, dealing with physical objects, I mean, you know, if you want a refund on Leanpub, it's like a kind of like, oh, we just changed some settings in your account with regard to accessing a book, and you know, we send you the money automatically. Whereas, like, refunding a physical book purchase is like a completely different thing. You know, and if there's a bug in the creation of an ebook, well, it's like, well, you know, tell us and we'll fix it. And then you click publish button again on Leanpub. But if you've sent out 100 copies of a print book and they've all got a bug in them, you know, that's probably a 95 returns that you're going to have to handle. So, but anyway, but we always really appreciate hearing that, and we know it's important. And what our solution is, our print ready PDF export option, which we have. So basically, like, you can from the same manuscript you use to produce your ebook, you can produce a print book. You just configure some settings, and then we give you the the sort of like digital files that you need to upload to any print-on-demand service
that's
that you're
perfect.
going to use. Yeah.
That's really perfect.
Well, Daniel, thanks you very much for taking the
Thank
time
you.
out of your evening to talk to me and talk to us. And thank you very much for being a Lean Pub author.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And as always, thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of the Front Matter podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate and review it wherever you found it. And if you'd like to be a Lean Pub author yourself, please check out our website at leanpub.com. Thanks.